Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a bit of an epic introduction. I don't usually get like good introductions like that. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am like beyond so excited to be here. And I can't believe I even know people who are in the audience, which is super cool already. I'm Beck Hopkins. I am a leadership coach and a facilitator. And really, for the last 9 years, I've been having the very cool job, or what I think is the super cool job, of bringing emotional intelligence and Brene Brown's research into organizations, into teams. And I think kind of my unofficial title, I like to call myself a connection consultant, because we know that from decades of research that if you don't feel connected to yourself, if you don't feel connected to the people that you work with, you cannot build trust. And without trust, you can't innovate and you cannot get really, really meaningful work done. So the purpose of this session today is to share with you the research from Brene Brown. So I'll share with you her research and the skill sets of courage that come from her. She's done a 10-year study on leadership, and I think they've got like 600,000 pieces of data now with that. So that you know, as a startup founder, how to create a culture that really has a business that not only survives, but a business that can actually keep pace in this constantly shifting technological landscape that we all find ourselves in, whether you're a startup or whether you're a bank or whatever organization you're in. We really need to create that culture of courage. So by the end of our 45 minutes together, you will leave knowing the 10 barriers from courageous cultures. You will have explored, I'll take you through the 4 skill sets of courage and just give you kind of a taster of each one. And then I want to give you some time at the end to consider what your personal call to courage is as a leader. Because I think I'll give you all this information, but then you'll be like, now what? Well, then you get to think about, out of everything you've learned, what's the thing that you think you need to work on to be able to create that culture? So that is the plan. It's going to be a speedy 45 minutes, and we'll ask me questions on the way through in the chat. I'll try and monitor both, and Vicky, I'm sure, can help me out with any questions as well. So let's get into it. I wanted to start with where Brene started with her research. So 10 years ago, she's been studying emotions for decades now. She's up to maybe her 25th year of studying emotions like shame, vulnerability, fear, but really looking at leadership for the last 10 years. And the first question they asked, they went out and interviewed leaders globally, from small startups through to companies like Disney and Pixar, and even in the military. And they asked them one question: what does brave leadership look like? And what they found, her research team found that people actually really struggled to answer that question. And so what the research team did is they flipped the question into what happens in the absence of brave leadership. And interestingly, then people could get really specific, and the data saturated really quickly. And as I said, they have 600,000 pieces of data, and they've coded that up into what are called the 10 barriers to courage. And they are really those things that get in the way of that meaningful connection and getting really impactful work done. So I'm going to take you through those 10 barriers. And what I want you to do is, as I go through them and you listen to them, there'll be some that kind of resonate for you around what you're seeing in your teams, in your organization, that you might want to focus on for your leadership, for that target. I call it the target culture that you want to create. So I'll take you through them and just see what resonates with you. So the first barrier to courage from her research is that we avoid tough conversations. We are not having clear, kind, respectful, honest conversations with people. When we're annoyed at someone or when they've disappointed us, we're not talking to them about it. We're actually talking behind their back, which creates a toxic environment in your organization. So we need to get better. And that's, interestingly, tough conversations training is the one thing I'm asked to go into organizations to do more than anything else, because we avoid them globally. The second one is we avoid talking about our fears and our feelings. And, you know, if I even poll you all here and just see, like, with a thumbs up, how many of you were raised to talk about your fears and your feelings when you were growing up? Like, usually there's a big fat zero coming in, because none of us, whereas now, like I've got 2 9-year-olds and an 11-year-old, they are emotionally literate. They can name a wide variety of emotions, where they show up in their body, how they're impacting them, and why they feel like that. Most leaders that I talk to can name 3 emotions: happy, sad, and pissed off. That is the range. So we really do need to get better at talking about fears and feelings, because it is those fears and feelings that drive the behavior. So if you're finding yourself in a team, in an organization with behaviors that need to be managed, you've got to have a look at what are the emotions that are sitting underneath that are driving those behaviors. And in order to do that, you need to have a wide level of emotional literacy. The third one is low levels of trust. Trust is literally the foundation of high-performing teams. If we don't trust each other, we self-protect. We hide our mistakes, we withhold information. So we need to be not just talking about trust once, but having it on the agenda again and again and again, and really knowing how to do that as well. So not only how to build trust, but how to repair it and how to work on trust in teams. Next one is being stuck in setbacks. We are ruminating. We are not moving through setbacks really easily. What's happening when something hard happens at work, we either shut down or we start to ruminate. And when we are stuck in those setbacks, we cannot innovate and we cannot be creative and we cannot actually see possibilities of what needs to be done. So we have to have a way of getting ourselves back from being stuck in our emotions to actually being back to being productive. Lack of innovation. I like to say, it's a pretty harsh saying, but I say innovate or die. Like your business, any business, you will not survive by staying the same. And there's many organizations that still think in 10 years, their business model is going to be the same. That is not the case. I can't think of any organization that will not have to shift, adapt, amend, innovate to stay current in the next 10 years. Because we've seen it. We've seen it with companies, we've seen it with industries. So if you have a lack of innovation, you will not survive. Action bias. This is an interesting one. So I'm a really action biased human, which means I like to get things done without often thinking about, all the other things that need to be considered. But this action bias, when we don't sit long enough with the problem, we end up with reactive plate spinning. And that reactive plate spinning means that it leads to poor decisions, and it actually leads to burnout. So what we need instead of this action bias is what I call productive urgency. So we need to be doing the right things. What else have we got on the list? Diversity and inclusion. Ignoring diversity and inclusion is going to limit your ability to be creative as an organization. And it's actually going to limit your ability to be truly relevant in the market as well. And what I notice in the large organizations that I work with is we are not having real transformational discussions about diversity and inclusion. We're doing tick box programs. We are not having those really necessary conversations that are really going to shift the dial quickly. Shame and blame. A culture of shame and blame in any organization is toxic, and you need to shut that down, because it stops people from taking risks. It stops people from sharing ideas, which are critical in a startup. You absolutely need to be able to innovate. And if you have people who are feeling shame and blame, and I'm going to share with you a little bit later the ways that you can see that showing up as well, so you can understand what that means. Ninth is not linking values to behaviors. Having clear articulation of your own values and of the values of the organization, and then attaching behaviors to that, is what really sets a culture up for success. And the more senior you get in an organization, or even the more power you have, the more you're being watched. And the more senior you are, the more people are looking at you to see if your behavior matches the values. And if they see that dissonance, you won't keep your people. You'll have engagement issues for sure. And then the last one is perfectionism. And look, I've both been a perfectionistic leader and I've worked for one. And I tell you what, neither side of that equation is healthy or sustainable. So when I was the perfectionistic leader, nothing anyone did was good enough. And it just disempowered the people that I worked with. And then when I worked for a perfectionistic leader, I was the disempowered one. And it's neither side of that. The perfectionistic leaders leads to burnout. The working for a perfectionistic leader leads to disempowerment. So They are the 10 barriers to courage from Brené's research. So I wanted to see if I can do a little poll with you guys. So you're going to need your phones for this one to see, grab the QR code. And I want to see out of those 10 barriers to courage, which is the one that you think is going to be the game changer for you in your organization. And then I'll flip over to Menti. I'll see if I can get my tech working and see, what are you guys noticing? Out of all of those things I've shared, which is the one that's going to be the one that you really need to pay attention to? All right, I'll give you 30 seconds to do that, and then we'll have a look and see what data we're collecting. All right, 10 seconds to go. All right, let me see if I've got this set up. Okay, there we go. Can you guys see that? No, you can? Great. Yeah, see, even here in this data, the avoiding tough conversations it's only a little bit higher. We've got not linking values to behaviors and action bias. Yeah, so you have a think about that in your organization, like this avoiding tough conversations. We need to not only skill up on it. I tell you what it is about tough conversations. It is not enough to just skill up on it. It is, you've got to do three things. You've got to have the self-awareness of what gets in the way of them, because how we were raised, the culture we were raised in, the country we were raised in, our gender, all sorts of things actually get in the way of tough conversations. And we need the skill set and we need to practice. And it's those three things that we're not doing in our organizations. Super interesting. All right. Now I've got to get back. This is my challenge. How do I get back? Am I back? Oh, I did it. My God, you wouldn't think I had a technology degree. Look, it was in 1999. It is completely irrelevant right now. Like, okay, that is the 10 barriers to courage. All right. So those 10 barriers to courage were then turned into, from her research, into what are called the 4 skill sets of courage: rumbling with vulnerability, living into our values, braving trust, and learning to rise. So I'm going to go through them. I'll just give you a light touch into them because these are the skill sets that form the Dare to Lead program, and they are deep. And so looking at those 4 is not particularly helpful. I'll give you a little bit of an insight into what's in each one. So rumbling with vulnerability is all about emotions. And we really do start with skilling people up in emotional literacy, because you cannot get to courage and you cannot innovate and do all those things you need to do without rumbling with vulnerability. And vulnerability is the definition that Brené uses. It's the emotion that we experience when there is risk, uncertainty, or emotional exposure. So you think of those tough conversations when you're about to speak to someone with more power than you, and you've got to pitch an idea, or you've got to push back on timeframes, or you've got to have a hard conversation about someone's behavior, especially if they've got more power than you. That vulnerability is what you'll feel in your body, and it will run through your body. And if you cannot manage that physical discomfort of vulnerability, you won't even be able to get the words out. So we have to be able to rumble with vulnerability to get to those courageous conversations. The other emotions we touch on, which I'll just run through super quickly, is we look at guilt, the difference between guilt and shame. We talk about humiliation, embarrassment, self-compassion, empathy, and the big one, we spend a lot of time here, we unpack shame. So shame is the painful experience that we have that makes us feel that we are unworthy of love and belonging. And it is, again, runs through our body, and shame can't survive being spoken. So we have to be able to notice it when it's in our body, understand what it is, and then be able to talk about it, because it thrives with silence. So I want to share with you I think the 16 ways that shame can show up in your organization, because I think this is where it goes from being this like concept of like shame to, oh my God, these are the behaviors. So I'll pop these up. And again, I'll talk you through them, because this is one of the most powerful pieces of Brené's work, is identifying how shame shows up in your organization. And look, some of these are like just everywhere, so we've given up, but don't give up. I'll talk you through them, because they're without working on these, you're just going to have a toxic environment that can't move fast enough. So the first one is back channeling. Back channeling is the meeting after the meeting. So you're in a meeting. So Vicky and I are in a meeting. We agree something. She says yes. And then she walks out. She talks to Ryan. She's like, cancel that. I'm not doing that. Like, but not saying it in the meeting. So we've got to have the courage to have the hard conversations in the meeting, not have it after. Blaming and finger pointing. I work with one large organization who they've even got like hand signals for their blaming. They say it's either your fault, my fault, or an act of God. We do not need blaming and finger pointing. We need to actually put the problem in front of us and kind of really stress test it and point fingers at the problem and work it out, not each other. Bullying. If you have got any instance of bullying in your organization, you've got to shut that down as quickly as possible. I don't care how high performing the person is. I don't care how much revenue they are bringing in, because they will make your organization so toxic that you're going to lose good people. So we have to get rid of bullying. Comparison. So this is not healthy competition, but comparison. So, oh, you're not doing it as good as that person, or you should be more like them. That can really induce shame in an organization. Cover-ups, discrimination, favoritism, and not only being a favorite person, it can be favorite teams. So teams working on new technology that's all fancy and glitzy. And then you've got your teams working on legacy technology where they're like bringing in all the revenue to support all the innovation. So we have to really be careful about favoritism and how we measure people. Gossiping. Gossiping's rife in nearly every organization I work with. Harassment, the invisible army. So the invisible army is when, and I had this in an email recently when I'm working with an organization and I'm co-facilitating with someone who I don't know very well, actually. And she says, we all decided this and we all decided that. And I'm like, who's we? Like, did they all meet? And so all of a sudden I'm ruminating because I'm like, did they all meet behind my back? What happened? But speak for yourself, not for this invisible we army that you've got. And if you're going to speak for other people, just have them there with you. Nostalgia. Nostalgia is interesting. So it's okay to look back on the way things used to be, but not if it stops you from moving forward through change. So we have to be really careful of that nostalgia when it's, the way things used to be. So that happens a lot when I've been through a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Nostalgia comes up a lot when you're going through really hardcore change. Passive aggressive behavior, perfectionism I've talked about. Power over. This is when we're just saying to people, just get it done without zooming out and giving them context. We need to give people context on why we're making the decisions we're making. Why are we delegating in the way we're delegating instead of just powering over people? Sarcasm. Sarcasm is not good with cross-cultural teams and it's not good on technology. You miss too much. Keep your sarcasm for when you know people really well and when you're up close and personal. Self-worth tied to productivity. This could be one maybe in the startup space. That's probably the one that happens a lot, where we tie our worth to what we produce. And that can be, you all know where that leads. That leads to burnout. And, but that's what we don't want. We want healthy people in healthy organizations that can do really good work. And then the last one, teasing. It's the same with sarcasm. Cross-cultural on technology, it's not a good place to be. So they are hopefully bring to some clarity around how that shame shows up in your organizations. So this is just a moment for you to pause and see, what are you noticing from where you sit in your organization or with the team you sit in? And just write down one or two that you think, oh, we've got a challenge with this and I'm going to actually do something about it. Because it's often we think when we see all these, it's those people over there, it's those other people, but we are all part of a system and we all take part in some of these. Like I've been in organizations where I've been gossiping, which actually doesn't come from a place of like, I just want to gossip. Usually gossip comes when information isn't shared in a timely manner, that people are just trying to get access to information. So then it creates a culture of gossip. So come at this with noticing first, but then a real curiosity on what could be sitting underneath some of these behaviors. Why are people back channeling? Well, our meetings are too short. Why are meetings too short? Because we're trying to get things done too fast. Why are we not slowing down? And just really do that root cause analysis that sits behind these behaviors and see if you can start to nudge them. All right. That is skill set number one. And skill set number one, actually out of the 3-day program, takes a day and a bit. So it's a big skill set. We've got a lot of empathy skill sets, self-compassion, really solid skill sets that we need in our organizations. Skill set number two, living into our values. And this is about alignment with corporate values to behaviors and also your personal values to behaviors. You have to know what your organization stands for, and you have to hold that strong and steady with every decision you make. With knowing your values really helps with those decisions. Like if you can say, we're making a decision because we value quality. We're making this decision because we value people's health and well-being. Like, what are the values you have and how are we behaving that helps you align with those values? So I'm going to play a little video from Brene on this, just 3 minutes. So you get to hear from Brene, not live, because, we don't have the budget for that. We've got, videos of her that you hopefully won't have seen unless you've been through a Dare to Lead program. But I hope I've shared my sound. Let me know, Vicky, if you can't hear this. And here's Brene talking about corporate values.
Okay, so our second skill set for building courage is living into our values. And here's the thing, you see, no cat posters. Like, if you don't understand your values and what they look like in terms of specific behaviors, you're just left with BS. Like, if you've got the, the hang in there baby poster, be resilient, I don't know what that means. You've got the, the big eagle, ha, integrity. I don't know what that means. That means like when you get to work, fly fast and catch small critters with your claws. Like, I don't know what that means. We've got to take our values and operationalize them into behaviors that we hold ourselves accountable for. And this is what was startling to me in this research, is that every company we've worked with over the course of a decade had a set of values. Fewer than 10% of those companies had operationalized their values into observable behaviors that people are taught, onboarded for, and held accountable for. If you've got a list of values and there are no behaviors that operationalize those values, that are measurable and observable, it's better not to have values. Because then you've got, Peter making up his definition. Integrity is making the most money I can make at the expense of everyone on my team. And then, Manuel is saying integrity is choosing what is right for me over what's right for the company. Like, you got to operationalize this stuff, because this is the work that binds a culture together, is shared values. So we're going to dig into those, operationalize them for you, and start thinking about how, and if it's outside of your sphere of influence to operationalize the values for your company, take those values into your team and operationalize those values for your team. Work within your sphere of control and influence. But most importantly, you can't live into what you can't name and describe.
So that's our second skill set. And it's not just values that we cover in that skill set, but values become the foundation for tough conversations. So when you can have a tough conversation from clarity of your values. So my values are connection, curiosity, and authenticity. So when I'm going into a hard conversation, I just check in with my values and I say, stay connected, stay curious, stay me. And that intention setting that you can have goes a massive way in a hard conversation into making decisions over who I work with. So we spend a lot of time on clarifying your core values in Dare to Lead. Okay, skill set number 3, braving trust. I usually don't have to convince anyone that trust matters, but in case I do, this came from the Neuroscience of Trust in Harvard Business Review. Compared with people at low trust companies, people at high trust companies report, and get these stats, seriously, 74% less stress, 106% more energy at work, 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with your life, like not just at work, and 40% less burnout. Like, that is a numbers game, right? So if you are not convinced that trust matters, and I know we've got Kathy on the call, Kathy and I were both part of a team that was so high performing because our leader talked about trust. She built trust with us. She made us love each other. She was such a good leader, and she didn't even probably have these stats, but she knew that that was the answer. And I kid you not, and I'll ask Kath this later, if this leader asked us to all come back and reunite, and this was back in what, 2008, that if she asked us to come back, we would be there in a heartbeat, because she knew the importance and she knew all this instinctively as well. So in Brené's work, she's got a recipe for trust where she's used her research and turned it into elements of trust. And BRAVING's the acronym. So are you clear with each other about boundaries? What's okay and what's not okay? I had a leader once who in my team who kept sharing things in a public forum that she should have been sharing with the team. And so I just had a conversation with her and said, look, it is okay to be frustrated about the work we're doing. It's not okay to share it in the public forum. Just come and talk to us about it. We can solve this together. So what's okay? What's not okay? Reliability. Reliability is doing what you say you're going to do, not just once, again and again. And so perfectionism is tied to this. So those who have high standards can often lead to a lack of reliability because they're working so hard to get everything perfect that they're dropping the ball on other things. Accountability is about owning your mistakes. There has not been one mistake that's happened in my 20-year career where I didn't have a part, and that's that accountability piece. Vault, this is about confidentiality. Don't share stuff that's not yours to share, period. Don't share, because those leaders who can hold real confidence are actually more appreciated in organizations than anyone else, because it means I can go to you, say something, and I know it's not going to end up being told to anyone else. So don't share anything that's not yours to share. Integrity, the definition in Brené's work is do what's right over easy, choose courage over comfort. And that is, again, back to those tough conversations. Choosing courage over comfort is what we need when we're going to innovate, when we're going to lead through change, when we're actually going to have those hard conversations. Non-judgment. Number one fear in organizations is fear of being judged. When I run Dare to Lead workshops, we get people to do what's called a safe container exercise, and we ask the question, what are your fears and concerns of being in the room? Comes up every single group, whether I'm working with CEOs or on warehouse floors, fear of being judged. The last one is generosity. And this is around really having a positive intent about someone. And even when they annoy you, when someone does something to really annoy you, just having some generosity, saying, do you know what? Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe I don't know what's going on in their morning. Like, I always ask groups, who hasn't got something else going on in their lives right now? Like we do. We've got families and kids and dogs and plants and aging parents and all the stuff. So we have to be really generous with each other when someone isn't acting like themselves or they've made a mistake. All right, the last skill set, which is my favorite, is the one that's how do you pick yourself back up after setbacks? And your ability to recover quickly is actually going to be what gives you an edge as a leader. Because if you are getting stuck in a setback and you're ruminating, you're obsessing over it, you're not just leaving that at work. You're then, when something hard happens and then you take it home and then you whinge to your partner about it or to your friends, all of a sudden you've ruined your own evening. Like those ruminations, we've got to be able to put them into perspective. That's what this skill set does. So it's about knowing when you're hooked by emotion, getting clear, like that's what's happening, being able to sense check it, being able to zoom out and reality check it, and then be able to see what are the emotions that's going on in that story for you. Why did that particular thing hook you? Was it that person? Was it the relationship? And then it's what was going on for them and what could be really going on for you. And then the end of that is we get to write our own story. So we call it the shitty first draft, which is the first story we make up. And then we finish it with like, what's the story I really want to own about this? So it's an epic skill set that like literally takes you from below the line to above the line. So below the line is when something hard has happened and you're in that, that mindset where you're like blaming people, denying it, making excuses, victim mentality. And I'm not saying don't go below the line. Like you're going to go below the line. Like who hasn't been below the line? Like what we're doing with this skill set is how can we get you quickly back above the line so that you can make better choices, hold people accountable, seek solutions, take action. That's the skill set for how to do that. And it's a really active and practical skill set. All right. They are your 4 skill sets of courage. That is a lot of information, but I wanted to finish with an activity for you because I want you to take away from this, like even if we never see each other again, I want you to take something from here that's really practical for you. And one of the first activities we do in Dare to Lead is called your call to courage. Where do you want to be braver as a leader? What is your call to courage? So what I want to do is just give you a couple of minutes here to write down from everything you've heard, whether it's the 10 barriers to courage or the skill sets that I've been talking about. What is the one where you kind of was like, oh, that sounds like me. I need, and I've got a few examples here to kind of help you out. So do you want to get better at understanding how your emotions are getting in the way of your leadership? Do you want to get better at asking for help when you're overwhelmed? Or could it be challenging the way things are done around here in a productive way? Do you want to get better at setting clear boundaries, including pushing back on timeframes with people with more power than you? Do you want to get better at having those tough conversations as close to the time as they need to happen? Or do you need to get curious about what is happening in your team and that anything that's getting in the way of innovation? So there's just a few ideas for you to have a think about. I'll give you a minute here of reflective silence and just write down your call to courage, because even just writing it down, just putting it down on paper, even if you do nothing else, you've put that out in the world and you will start moving through the world and noticing things from that lens. So I'm going to be quiet for 30 seconds. If I can do it. It's not my skill set. I'm going to work on that one. And it could be something from here, or it could be some feedback that you've been getting over the years, like something that you're like, do you know what? I really need to look at that. It's, we talk about not listening to the cheap seats when it comes to feedback, but if you are getting a feedback theme that's coming from multiple people and it's similar, it's worth having a look at. Don't listen to the cheap seats that are just one comment that you're like, whatever. Like, this is really looking at what you know to be true about what you need to work at. That could be your call to courage. It could be one of these things, could be some of those things that you saw in how shame shows up in your organization, or it could be a barrier to courage. Lots to choose from where you get to do your work. All right, so people, I'll tell you what you learned. You learned the 10 barriers to courageous courage. You learned the 4 skill sets from the research of Brené Brown, and you had a little moment to consider what your own personal call to courage is as a leader. So hopefully that was useful to you. If you want to connect with me, grab your phones. I'm on LinkedIn. Tell you what, I'm a terrible LinkedIner. I'm not on any social media except this, and I post maybe once every 6 months, but I promise you I'll try better. I just is how I feel about that. Anyway, I'm connected with a lot of really cool people. So you can use me for introductions, like, I don't know, whatever, connect with me. See how you feel. I'll promise I'll try and do better. I'm going to do some videos at some point. I don't know, maybe.
I like that idea, Rebecca.
What, my videos?
Yeah, you should definitely do some videos.
I think so. Like, I'm better at talking than I am at writing. So maybe that's probably a good skill set for me. So I've also popped in here. So, and Vicky, you can talk about this. We've popped 2 dates in the diary for the 2 versions of Dare to Lead I run. So I run a 3-day in person, and it is glorious. It is 3 days of meaningful connection, deep conversations, and working on your courage and working on that call to courage. And really what we do is we take your call to courage and you learn the skill sets. And then every time you learn something, you circle back and say, how does what I've just learned help me move forward on that call to courage? And then you get time at the end of day 3 to look back through everything you did to see what you want to take into the world. Full of meaningful connection. The 8-week virtual Dare to Lead is also epic, but it's different. So the 8-week virtual is 3 hours once a week for 8 weeks. And the difference is you still get the connection, but you get really solid integration, because one of the hardest things about this work is that you come to the 3 days and you're all excited, and then you go back to work and the pressure's on, and you're like, that all went out the window. So the integration piece that happens with the virtual means you learn something, you've got a week in between now and then, you go out, you look at what's happening at work, you come back, you learn something else. So that integration happens much more easily. All right, that's me, Vicky. I was going to finish with, I want to hear what is everyone's biggest takeaway from this session. So we learn looking back, and I want to tap into the collective wisdom of this epic group of humans who joined us today. Thanks for joining us and listening to me rabbit on for 45 minutes. I used to get the feedback when I was young that I could talk underwater, but I'm like, you know, those teachers who said that, I'm like, I get paid for it now. So whatever, see you later. Yes. Anyway, I'm now talking about myself when I'm supposed to be asking you to do something. So tell me, what's your biggest takeaway? Pop it in the chat. What are you taking from this? I want to know what's resonated the most. And you can say nothing. If you were like, what is this stuff? I don't know. You can say that. I'm really resilient. I tell you what, I'm like Teflon. Thanks, Kathy. I know, right? 10 barriers to courage, research-based and globally researched as well. What else? Yeah, below the line, above the line. That's a good one just to take with you, right? Like, and notice when you're below the line, but notice when others are below the line. And you can even just use that language to say, hey, do you think we're below the line? And it becomes not about the person, but it actually becomes a really good frame. Oh yeah, so good here. Leadership is skill and craft, both add to knowledge. Beautiful. Yeah, the invisible army. Yeah, totally. It's out there. It's out there, Millie. I tell you, watch out for it and shut it down. Oh, I love it, Arvind. Yes, wallow for a little bit. Just wallow with some perspective. I don't mind a bit of wallowing, you know, but get yourself back above the line. Julian said operational. Oh, you guys have taken heaps. This is so cool. Thanks, Marie. Thanks, Julian. All right, Vicky, I'm going to stop talking. Over to you. And look at that timing, 3 minutes to go.
That was amazing. You are a rock star. I don't know how you fit all that in. Also, love the fact that that last slide matched your t-shirt. Just
thank you. Just on brand.
I love, yeah, keeping that values alignment and career alignment to your brand. That was so great. Thank you so much, Beck. I think for me, what was really powerful was that conversation around values and understanding our personal values. And I love how you approach that. Am I going into this meeting with these two, like, just a great quick reminder, isn't it? It's like a post-it note that you always have to have on your computer.
But also looking at someone else's. So if I know that your values are courage, integrity, and honesty, I can check them and go, okay, when I go into that conversation with Vicky, what does she need? What does she need in this moment? And that's the stuff I never had in corporate. I was just like winging it wildly. Like, but if you can do that and check in with your own values and with the person that you're talking to.
Yeah. And, you know, these are all great skills when we are, we've got our startup, we, you know, might have just got funding, now we've got to hire a team, and maybe we've never managed a team before. Yeah. And so stepping into this leadership journey with these skills, with some of this knowledge and with some of this wisdom that has been, like you say, you know, globally researched and brought to us in a really bite-sized package. It's a really great tool to have in our toolbox to be able to go back to that. Oh, am I below the line or are we above the line? How am I going to keep my team so that they understand that we're a trusting team, that we trust each other and we're going to lead, we're going to work together on this problem. And you know, all these little snippets of knowledge is so powerful for a startup. Even, you know, the startups that already have teams, that's, you know, this is a really great reminder around, okay, what might be starting to form here, which negative behaviors or the way people are showing up into this environment right now. What do we want to nib in the butt really quickly? I love that that comment around having those courageous conversations early. Like That's the
And
biggest.
that's the power of the startup, right? Like you can create your culture. Like I work with big, clunky, old organizations, and changing them is hard. You guys have got like, let's do it from the start. What's the target culture? And get to know your people with their values. And it's a really beautiful opportunity to create the culture that you need, right?
Absolutely. No, it's great. And I'm really excited for you to be running the full program with us. And we'll email everyone out the more details about that after this event. So if you are interested, then please do check that email out and register for those events later in the year. So before we go, though, we'd love to be able to open it out to questions to people. So feel free to come off mute if you want to ask your question directly, or if you just want to sneakily add it in the chat, that's totally fine as well. But does anybody in the group have any questions that they would like to ask of Beck?
I'll also say we are at time. So if you have to go because you've got somewhere else to be, that is okay as well. But if I'll hang back here for 15 minutes for anyone who wants to stay and ask questions. Kathy, hang out with me. I want to hear from you as well. Yeah, Alicia.
Oh, hi. You know, it's almost midnight here, at 1:45. You know, anyway, lovely being here. You know, this is what I've been waiting just to watch, to enjoy. It's me. Well, you know, I love each and every word you said. It's wonderful. I've got quite a question. Is it possible to attend this event that refers to 3 days, just to take a deep dive into all this? The thing is that I would need a scholarship or some kind of, or just a glimpse, because you know the exchange rate is unthinkable. It's here, you know. It's and actually I've got another question. Because I'm moving to the U.
Oh, we've lost you, Alicia.
And I'd love to take all that. Oh, yeah, my internet is not working properly tonight.
We seem to be losing.
Yeah, maybe turn your camera off, Alicia, or maybe pop your question in the chat, and then we can answer it.
On LinkedIn, Rebecca.
Yes. Yeah, you can ask in the chat here, or you can contact me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, Millie.
Millie.
Hi, Rebecca. That was fantastic so far. So just a bit of backstory. I'm someone who has had no corporate life. Only ever worked in startups. So definitely this was really useful for me to learn a lot of the challenges that clients that I'm working with are facing.
Yeah.
I'd love to know from your experience, what is something that really helps people who are potentially quite stubborn or set in their ways, help them to actually take action and sort of make changes to their, I guess, current approach?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. So I do a lot of work on leading through change. And what I've learned over decades is that people aren't averse to change, they're averse to loss. So for example, and you know, simple example of this is moving a corporate location. Those people who live closer to the new location are like, yeah, best move ever. Those people who live further away, like, this sucks. This change is the worst. So it's not actually the change, it's their perspective on it. So often with people who are resistant to change, they just need to have their loss acknowledged. So sitting with a person and understanding, like, what's going on for you? Tell me your perspective, tell me your experience, and practicing empathy goes a really long way, because people aren't usually just stubborn for no reason at all. Like, people have backstories, and they could be overworked, they could have problems at home, you don't know. And, or they could know more, they could be working from a set of assumptions that you don't have. So you can say, tell me your assumptions that you're working from. I'll tell you the assumptions I'm working from, and just create that connection and see if that kind of shifts it a little bit.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Super.
Question, Millie. Amazing. This has been great. Thank you so much, Beck. You're you really helped us a lot in this space, and I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. This is like my happy space.
It's so good. I think you and Kathy need to do a reconnect.
We are going to do a reconnect. Do you know, and it's so good because Kathy and I really were part of, you know, in a large corporate, part of one of the highest performing teams I've ever been in, right,
Wow.
Kath? Like it was, and the leader she was banging on about trust all the time. And we were like, God damn it. Like, what is she talking about this again? And she held us accountable. Like she held me accountable to the way I'd behaved in a way that wasn't helpful to the team. She sat me down and, you know, she really recognized my defense. I was a very defensive employee. And I remember her sitting with me and saying, I'm going to give you some feedback that's going to be really hard to hear. And you're going to get defensive. And I need you to just stay open and listen. And she literally said it. And I was like, and I was like defending it. And she was like, this is what I'm saying. You need to stay open. And I can't even remember what the feedback was, but I remember how she did it. And she held me accountable. And because her intention was for me to grow. Her intention wasn't for me to be told off, to feel shame. Her intention was for me to be better. And I was better after that. So, you know, I had a lot to learn, and I was lucky to have leaders who knew this stuff instinctively, because this is a leadership skill set that's out there. It's research-based. It's not like made up. So you're going to have leaders in the organizations you work with, or even yourself, that are already leading in this way. Like that's, you know, we're not saying this is going to be new for everyone, but for some people, it's just confirming what they're already doing really well.
Yeah, it's great.
I'd like to add to that. When you go through this, Beck, on point in what you've said, and what we went through, it was euphoric. When you have an ecosystem for a team, for an organization that goes through this, you will forever chase that in your career, that euphoric feeling of, wow, that culture really just rocked. And you want to, you know, bring the gang back together or whatnot.
And we loved each other as well, right? And we literally could have, and you need this in startups. You need to be able to have hard conversations and look at things and go, I disagree. And then you're like, we used to go, I disagree. Do you want to go for a drink? Yeah, okay. And then we go for a drink. You've got to be able to leave the stuff that's that rumination behind, because you're caring about the outcome, and you're caring about the product, or you're caring about the service. Like, what is it you care about? And how can you get everyone's brains on it? And then have a laugh as well. Like, humor goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very courageous thing to be able to speak openly with each other, but also to know that there's trust on both sides. So it's not.
And you've got to go back to building the trust. You have to.
That when it's received with defense, or if it's received in a critical way, then that's not productive for an organization. And I just think it's wonderful that startups get the opportunity to start their culture with this kind of training now. Like, you're not just starting and winging it and being triggered every 5 minutes by something that's happening in the organization, by a team member or a board member or an investor. You actually can understand what's happening for you and step into that and be brave about how you approach those things. So what a beautiful gift to be able to give startups. I think, it's really powerful. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. If there's no more questions, we'll let you all get out of here.
Have a great rest of your day. We're saying thank you. That's great. Thank you, everybody. It works.
Oh, nice, Ben. Yeah, exactly. Great. Thanks, Millie. Thanks, everyone.
So good. Thanks so much.
Beautiful. And feel free to leave loudly. I have this weird thing where everyone just dies off. So unmute, shout whatever you want, and then you get out of here. Bye, everyone. Bye. Nice to see you, Kathy.
This has been great. Thanks you
very much, Rebecca. And
Network. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Hey, baby. Yeah.
Hi, everyone's baby. Yay.
Bye.
We did it. Happy birthday.
Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.